for assistant principals, principals, and maybe teachers that want to go into site leadership. Yes, I'm a former teacher, well, always a teacher. I am a former assistant principal and principal, and I loved it. Like, if the things that I know now, if I ever chose to go back into that role, wow. But there is something that I remember about being an assistant principal, even a teacher. And I wish that I remembered it very well as a principal. And I learned this when I was a principal. In my career as a teacher, I remember being very reflective. Like, after I taught a lesson, reflect on it. Did students actually learn something? Did they grasp the concept? Did I intervene when I needed to? Did their faces look perplexed? Like, I don't really get this, but we'll just go with it. Or maybe you were wrong and then a student corrected you. Like, being reflective on what was happening at the end of that class period. I was a middle school teacher, but maybe even the end of the day, like reflecting on what happened. Now, as an assistant principal, I remember just, no one is ever good at something before they do it because you're first at something. Like, my first year of teaching, it was my first time ever doing it. First time I was ever a cashier at a store. I worked at Nordstrom. Like, I was first at it. I had to learn the role. I remember being very reflective at the end of the day, and remember as an assistant principal at a very comprehensive high school in California, the end of the day, sometimes I was very exhausted. I would reflect on that, like, why am I so exhausted? And typically an assistant principal's role is discipline. And I remember being thinking, oh my gosh, I am in moments where all I'm doing is disciplining and providing consequences to whatever happened. And I remember thinking, if I could do something that helped me feel better, what would it be? And I mentioned it to the principal. I'm like, this is just like, it makes you feel bad. Like, if you're just providing discipline, because it's typically maybe 1 or 2% of the population that happens to. But it felt like that was all. It felt like 100% of the population. So what we did is we started to learn maybe something that the principal does and take that on for maybe a day during that week or twice a month or something like that. And then I remember the principal saying, we don't always have enough guest teachers, substitutes. Go into a classroom and guest teach the area that you love. So I was like, oh, so I guest taught biology, I guest taught chem, I guest taught physics. So when those teachers were gone, I would say, if we don't have, and if it's only like one period, maybe I could go in there. So I started to feel like the great things that were happening in the school site. So I was being very reflective on what it was that I needed to do to make myself feel better and be a part of it. I also learned that we could start creating conversations about what could we do to help students and intervene before they get suspended. So, I mean, we had conversations, we started providing professional learning for teachers and trainings for parents on what education code was and why kids even get suspended. So that was kind of a fun learning experience for me. And then I was in my principalship. It was in elementary school. And I remember learning a term, and that term was called Nepantla. And that term, Nepantla, was not just being reflective, but being reflexive. Before we get into what reflexive is and Nepantla, I'd like you to write down 3 things as a teacher or 3 things as an assistant principal or principal that you can reflect on at the end of the day. Like, how do you feel emotionally? And then reflect on what could you do in order to change that. And the reason why I say that is because when we reflect on how we feel, do we feel exhausted? Do we feel energetic? What can we do differently? And reflect on that. And then work with your team on what are some things that you can change or improve upon. Now, let's go into Nepantla. Now, what is Nepantla? Nepantla refers to being in the middle, meaning in the right now, the present, while it's happening. So imagine, I'm going to give you a little bit of a chaos moment. Imagine being in the middle of the eye of a storm, like a hurricane, like you're in the middle of everything going on, but that storm is not affecting you. That is kind of what Nepantla is. It's being reflexive. Reflexivity or being reflexive is being in the moment, in the right now, and not becoming part of it. Like, you can be in the middle of, maybe there's some chaos going on at a school. Maybe there are 2 students fighting and maybe they're just arguing, but you know that you can't become part of it, like being in it, but not of it. Meaning, you know that if you take on that emotion right now, you're going to get lost in it. But when you have reflexivity or you're reflexive or in Nepantla, you actually can handle what's happening and not become part of the problem. Now, Nepantla is a term from the Nawatla tribe. And the Nawatla tribe came up, well, it's their term called Nepantla. So it means being in the middle, in the moment, and what's happening now. So I want you to think about how can you be reflexive as a teacher in the moment, or when have you been reflexive? And if you're a teacher right now, you know when you've been reflexive. And I'm going to give you an example. When you're in the classroom and you have this awesome lesson and you know you're going to rock it, you last year you rocked it, like you rocked it, and you're teaching this lesson, and all of a sudden kids have this like blank face. They're like, we don't get it. But they don't say anything. Like young students will just go with it. They're not going to say anything. They're just going to go with it. But they have this stoic face, like, and you like start to realize, okay, they're not getting it. In this moment right now, you're in the middle of it. You now can do what is also called expert noticing. You're the expert. You notice that the kids aren't getting it, the students aren't getting it. What are you going to do right now to change it? That is reflexivity. Now, reflective would have been you did nothing about it. At the end of the day, you're like, I'm going to need to change that, go back to it tomorrow. But decision makers, you as the educator, you as the assistant principal or principal, you can actually make decisions right now in the moment while it's happening. Now, I've had this happen before where a student was really injured. I mean, injured enough to where we had to take the student in an ambulance. And I had this parent that actually worked for the district. This was in another school district, and the student hurt themselves pretty badly, bleeding. However, the student seemed very calm, but you could tell the student was kind of going into shock. And the parent came in and saw this student, and I explained it to the parent, and the parent started to get really worked up. Now, I could have gone to that same place with the parent and got really worked up and been like, oh my gosh, yes, this is terrible. Instead, I was like, I need you to calm down. Your child is going to be okay. I did say the student's name. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to calm yourself right now. Take some deep breaths because we need to be there for your child. After we get your child, because at the time the parent was like, oh, I'll just take the child. We're like, no. So that's when the parent was like heightened. And get your child in the ambulance. Yes, you can go with. One of us will follow because the parent didn't have anybody to go with. And we brought that parent down. And I gave the parent permission. After you get to the hospital and your child's in the hospital room, you have the permission to leave and go and cry or lose your mind, whatever it is. But right now, you need to give yourself permission to be calm. That is being reflexive, like being able to handle a situation and bringing whatever the group, whatever is happening in the problem to not become part of the problem. And that's sometimes very difficult. And even that is difficult for me. Every new position, I have to figure that out. And a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people don't even know how to help you with that. So that is something that even when you get coaching from other site leaders, from administrators at the district office, especially if they have a background in it, because you always need someone to coach you through that. So one of the things that I really like for you to do is write down some things that you know that you've been very reflexive on, or maybe that one moment that was like really chaotic. You wish you could have done something differently. Turn my timer off. What could you have done differently? What could you have done where you could have been in the moment where you didn't become part of the issue or get like heightened? Maybe you saw two educators arguing. Maybe you were in the parking lot and you saw two parents arguing. What could you have done in that moment where you could have been reflexive and not been like, oh my God, this is happening. Oh my goodness, what can we do differently? So I want you to take a moment, pause, and write some of those things down. Now, if you've not had a coach before, even if you're a principal or a site leader, teachers typically have coaches because there might be district teachers on special assignment to coach you through things. But the question I would ask you is, do you have like a coach that can help you through and mitigate some of the things that maybe not student information, things like that, but do you have someone that can help you? Maybe you've partnered with other principals in the school district, outside of the school district. When I was principal, I had that. Like I went to other principals and we coached each other through things because maybe they have already dealt with it. And there are times where I'm like, now I need a coach again. So think about what you can do. Now, if you don't have a coach, I recommend that you work with someone, even if you are a principal in the United States. I recommend going through the National Association of Elementary School Principals, National Association of Secondary School Principals, or whatever your associations are in your state so that you can be a part of a group of people that have similar things that they go through. And even teachers, you're probably members of the National Educators Association where you can connect. And the reason why I say connect, because not everybody's going to have the same information or same belief systems that you have. So you may need to talk to somebody about those things, because my culture is different than other people's culture. So when I go into a new organization, that's something that I'm really learning, is that people may not embrace that culture. So I have to learn about their culture, how to embrace the community's culture, and things like that. I highly recommend having that coach. And if you don't, I do have a very 50-page short book for principals. It's in the actual description. However, I made a white page for it. If you just want to get the synopsis of it, you can grab that synopsis in the description in the YouTube video and let me know what you think. Because I really believe that as administrators, we should find that coaching. And even now, I realize I need a new coach. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Let me know how you're doing, how you're being reflexive, and how you're being reflective in your positions that you're currently in. Thank you so much for watching.